kind of machine works in theory meaning. The economy works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it or they don't agree on how it works. And this has led to a lot of needless economy suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economy template. Though it's unconventional, it has helped me to anticipate and to step for global financial crisis. And it has worked well for me for over several years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple mechanical way. It's made up of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again zillion times. These transactions are bubble as driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. Number three, the long-term debt cycle. We'll look at these three forces and how linked them on top of each other create a good template for tracking economic movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest form of the economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up. And a transaction is a very simple thing. You make transactions all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of buyer exchanging money or credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spends just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent, you could know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block of the economy machine. All cycles in all processes in an economy are driven by transactions. So if we can understand transaction, we can understand the whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers and all the sellers making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is the mud market, or car market, or stock market, or markets for millions of things. An economy consists of all time transactions and all of its market. If you added up total spending and a total quantity sold in all of the market, there's everything you need to know to understand the economy. It's just so simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage in transactions in the way I just described. Exchanging money and credit for goods, services, and financial assets. The biggest buyer and seller is the government, which consists of two important parts. A central government that collects taxes and spends money, and a central bank, which is different from the buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does this by influencing interest rate and printing new money. For this reason, as well as the central bank is an important player in the flow of credit. Credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of economy and probably the rest are understood. It's the most important part because it's the biggest and the most volatile part. Just like buyers and sellers go to market to make transactions, so do lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something and can't afford, like a house or a car. When they want investment, something like starting a business. Credit can help both lenders and borrowers get what they want. The borrower's promise to pay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created. And two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough. But credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into a debt. Debt is both an asset to lender and liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear, and the transaction is settled. So why is the credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because on a person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns, and every dollar you earn, someone else has spent. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he is more worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things: the ability to repay the collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that can repay, he has borrower set to use a collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increases income allows increases borrowing, which allows increases spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing and so on. Impressive pattern is the economic growth and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give it something in order to get something. And how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we run and the accumulated knowledge raises our living standard. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raises their productivity and their living standard faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that is necessarily true of the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because the productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver of economic swings. That is, because the resources comes more than it produces when you cut it, and it processes to consume less than we produce when you have to pay it back. Debt swings occur into big cycles. One takes about 5 8, the other takes about 75 to 100 years. Where most people feel the swings, they typically don't see them cycles because they see them to up close day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we are going to step back to look at the 3-day process and how they interact to make up our experiences. As mentioned, the swings around the line are not due how much innovation or hard work there is primarily due how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increased productivity is the only way for growth. Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time anyone else is more productive. If we follow the transaction that apply this out, we see a progression like a productivity growth line. But because we borrow, we have cycles. This isn't due to any rules regulation. It's the human nature and the way that credit works. This borrowing is simply a way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can't afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this is you essentially need to borrow from your future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you can make in order to pay back. It very quickly resembles a cycle. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is as true for an individual as it is for the economy. This is why understanding credit is so important because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events of the happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy your beer from a bartender, which cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy your beer at credit, it's like selling a bartender. You're saying you from a debate in the future. Together you hand the bartender credit, the asset, or liability. You just create the credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bartender later that the asset or the liability disappear, the debt goes away, and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way you increase your spending is to produce more. But in an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and also allows incomes to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. No, don't get me wrong, credit is necessary, something bad that's cause of cycles. It's bad when finance is overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when it efficiently allocates resources and reproduces income so you can pay back debt. For example, if you borrow money to buy big TV, if it does generate income for you, pay back to debt. But if you borrow money to save a tractor, and the tractor harvests more crops and more money, then you can pay back to debt in improvement in your living standard. In an economy with credit, you can follow the transactions and see how credit grow. Let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. Your credit worth enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $10,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person earning $110,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000. So we can spend $121,000 even though he has only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transaction, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember, borrowing creates cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us to impose short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases with significant expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle, spending continues to increase and prices start to rise. This happens because the increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of the thin air. When the amount of spending and incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing price rise, it raises interest rate. With higher interest rate, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of the existing debt rises. Think about this as a monthly payment of your credit card going up. Because people borrow less have higher debt repayments that have less money left over to spend. So spending slow. And since a person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases, and we have a recession. If recession becomes too severe, inflation is no longer a problem. The central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates, debt repayments are reduced and borrowing and spending pick up. And see another expansion. As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is concentrated only by the willingness of lenders or borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is usually available, there's an economic expansion. When credit is usually available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5-8 years and happens over and over again over decade. But notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth in the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people foresee it. They have an inclination or to borrow and spend more instead of paying back down. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of the time, debt rise faster than incomes created the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming indebted, lenders even more fairly extend credit. Why? Because things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. asset value of growing up. The stock market lows. It's a boom. We pays to buy goods, services, and financial assets with borrowed money. When people do a lot of that, we call it bubble. So even though debt is growing, incomes have been growing nearly as fast as offset down. Let's call the ratio of debt to income the debt burden. So long as incomes continue to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset value is lower. People borrow huge amounts of money to buy assets investment, causing their prices to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with the accumulation of rush of debt, rising incomes and asset value help borrowers remain creditworthy for a long time. But this obligatory cannot continue forever, and it doesn't. Over the decades, the debt burden slowly increases, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1998 and the United States back in 1929. And now the economy begins deleveraging. In deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit is fear, asset prices drop, banks get squeezy, the stock market crashes, social tensions rise on the world, holding the start for feeling themselves The other way, as incomes fall in the debt repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer creditworthy, credit drops up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayment. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. They rush to sell assets for the market at the same time as spending falls. This is when the stock market collapses, the real estate market tanks, and banks get into trouble. As asset prices drop, the value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops. This makes borrower even less creditworthy. People feel poor, credit rapidly this fear. Less spending, less income, less wealthy, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to recession, but the difference here is that interest rates can be lowered to save the debt. In a recession, lowering interest rates works to stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates doesn't work because interest rates are already low once you need 0%. So the stimulation ends. Interest rates in the United States hit 0% during the deleveraging of the 1930s and again in 2008. The difference between a recession and deleveraging is that if deleveraging borrowers' debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can be relied by lowering interest rate. Lenders realize that debt have become too large to ever be fully paid back. Borrowing have lost their ability to repay and the collateral has lost value. They feel crippled by the debt. They don't even want more. Lenders don't lend and borrow, stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like an individual. So what do you do about deleveraging? The problem is that burdens are too high and they must come down. There are several ways this can happen. 1. People, business, and governments cut their spending. 2. Debt are reduced through fraud and restructuring. 3. Rate is redistributed from the haves to the haves not. And finally 4. The central bank print new money. These 4 ways happened in everything deleveraging in the modern history. Usually spending is cut first. As we just saw, people, business, and even governments tighten their belts and cut their spending so that they can pay down their debt. This is often referred to as austerity. When borrowers stop taking on new debt and start paying down old debt, you might expect the debt burden to decrease. But the opposite happens. Because spending is cut, and one man's spending is another man's income, it causes incomes to pay for. Therefore, faster the debt are repaid, and the debt burden actually gets worse. As we've seen, this cut in spending is deflationary and painful. Businesses are forced to cut costs, which means less job and higher unemployment. This leads to the next step. Debts must be reduced. Many borrowers find themselves unable to repay their loans, and the borrower's debt are rendered asset. When a borrower doesn't repay the bank, people get nervous and the bank won't be able to repay them, so they rush to withdraw their money to bank. Banks get squeezed, and people, businesses, and banks default on their debt. This is a real economic contraction, is a depression. A big part of depression is people discovering much of what they thought about their world is the really there. Let's go back to the bar. When you bought a beer and put in a bar tab, you promised you repay the bar tab. Your promises become an asset of the bartender. But if I break your promise, if you don't pay back, essentially default on your bar tab, then the asset he has is really worth anything. It has basically disappeared. Many renters don't want their asset to disappear, agree to a restructuring. Debt restructuring means renters get paid back less or get paid back over a longer time frame over the low interest rates than the worst first agreed. Somehow a contract is broken as a new made resist debt. Lenders would rather little have a little something than all of things. Even though debt disappears, debt restructuring causes incomes and asset value to disappear faster. So the debt burden continues to get worse. Like cutting spending, the reduction is also painful, and this is deflationary. All of this impact into central bank government because lower incomes and less employment means the government collects fewer taxes. At the same time, it needs increases spending because employment has risen. Many of the least employed have incurred savings of need financial support from the government. Additionally, governments created stimulus plans and increases their spending to make up for the decreases in the economy. Government's budget deficits is poured in the leverage because they spend more than they earn in taxes. This is only happening when you hear budget deficits on the news. To fund their deficit, governments need to either raise tax or borrow money. But with incomes falling and so many employed, who is the money going to come from? The rich. Since governments need more money and since the wealth is heavily contracted in hands of a smaller percentage of the people, governments naturally raises less taxes on the wealthy, which facilitates a reduced version of wealth in the economy, from the haves to the have-nots. But have-nots who are suffering begin to resent the world haves. The world haves begin squeezed by the world weaker money, falling asset prices, and higher taxes, begin to resent the haves-nots. If the depression continues, social disorder can break out. Not only the tensions rise within countries, they can rise between countries, especially very incredible countries. This situation can lead to political change that can sometimes be extreme. In the 1930s, this led to Hitler coming to power, war in Europe, and dispersion in the United States. The pressure to do something to end the depression increases. Remember, most of what people thought was money was actually credit. So when credit disappears, people don't have enough money. People are desperate for money, and you remember to can print money. The central bank can. Having already lowered its interest rates to nearly zero, it's forced to print money, unlike cutting spending, debt reduction, and royalty reduction portion. Printing money is inflationary and stimulus. Inevitably, the central bank prints new money out of thin air and uses it to buy financial assets, government bonds. It happens in the United States during the Great Depression, and again in 2008 when the United States Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, printed over $2 trillion. Other central banks around the world kept cool, printed around of money too. By buying financial assets with this money, it helps drive up asset prices, which makes people more creditworthy. However, this only helps those who own one financial asset. You see, the central bank can print money, but it can only buy financial assets. The central government, on the other hand, can buy goods and services and put money in the hands of the people, but it can't print money. So in the more stimulated economy, the must cooperate by buying government bonds. The central bank essentially lends more to the government, allowing it to run a deficit and increases spending on goods and services, tourist stimulated programs, and employment benefit. This increases people's income as well as the government's debt. However, it will lower the economy total debt burden. This is a very risky time. Policymakers need to balance the four ways that debt burdens come down. The deflationary wave needs to balance with the inflationary wave in order to maintain stability. A balanced collateral there can be beautiful deleveraging. You see, a beautiful deleveraging can be ugly or it can be beautiful. How can a deleveraging be beautiful? Even though deleveraging is a difficult situation, handling a difficult situation in the best possible way is beautiful. A lot more beautiful than the debt put for the unbalanced excesses at the leveraging pace. In a beautiful deleveraging, debt decline relative to income. Real economic growth is positive, and inflation is the problem. It is achieved by having a right balance. The right balance requires certain mix of cutting spending, reducing by debt production rate, printing money so that economy and social stability can be maintained. People will ask if printing money will raise inflation. It was it also pulling credit. Remember, spending is what matters. A dollar's spending paid for with money has the same effect on the prices as a dollar's of spending paid for with credit. By printing money, the central bank can make up for disappearance of credit with an increase in the amount of money. In order to turn things around, the central bank needs to not only promote income growth, but get the rate of income growth higher than the rate of interest on the accumulated debt. What do I mean by that? Basically, incomes need to grow faster than debt grows. For example, let's assume that the country going to deleveraging has a debt to income ratio of 110%. That means the most amount of debt it has is the same as the amount of income the entire country makes in a year. Now think about the interest rate of debt there. Let's say it's 2%. Its debt is growing at 2% because of that, their interest rate. Incomes growing at around 1%. You will never reduce that burden. Printed the money to get the rate of income grow above the rate of interest. However, printing money could easily be abused because it's so easy to do and people prefer and the alternatives. It can avoid printing much money causing unacceptably high inflation the way Germany did during its deleveraging in the 1920s. And policymakers achieved the right balance of deleveraging is so dilemmatic. Growth is so slow, but the debt burdens go down. That's beautiful deleveraging. When income begins to rise, borrowing begins to appear more creditworthy, and one appear more creditworthy. Lenders begin to lend money again. Debt burdens finally begin to fall. Able to borrow money, people can be spent more. Eventually, the economy begins to grow again, leading to inflation failures of the long-term debt cycle. Though the leveraging process can be horrible and handled badly. If handled well, it will eventually fix the problem. It takes roughly a decade or more for debt burdens to foreign economic activity to get back to normal, hence the term lost decade. In closing, the economy is a little bit more complicated than this template suggests. However, in the short-term debt cycle on top of the long-term debt cycle, and then rank report of the productivity goal drawing. Reasonably good template for seeing where we've been, where we now, and where we probably had. So, in summary, there are three rules of thumb that I'd like to take away from this. First, don't have debt rise faster than income, because your debt burdens will eventually crush you. Second, don't have income rises faster than productivity, because you will eventually become uncompetitive. And third, you already can't raise your productivity, because in the long run that's what matters most. This is a simple advice for you and a simple advice for a policymaker. You might be surprised, but most people, including most policymakers, don't pay enough attention to this. This template has worked for me, and I hope it will work for you. Thank you.